The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. Good crack-a-noon to our friends on the East Coast. I am Todd Obert of Productive Corporation, joined here virtually alongside me are James Adams and Joe Zingarelli from SentinelOne. Glad you could join us to talk SentinelOne and EDR. It's going to be a fun one. SentinelOne's been leading in this space and continues to lead, and today you're going to see why. Pretty excited to hear what these guys say and see what they show us in the demo. But first, as you know, we're going to meet Productive in 1 minute. Then we're going to turn it over to James, and we'll talk briefly or probably cover a lot of this stuff throughout the presentation of why there really is a need for EDR. I mean, a lot of insurance companies are demanding it. End-to-end visibility, what you see with the solution, automated resolution and response, and some things they do, including cross-stack correlation, amongst many other things. So we will get to that quickly. But before we get to that, let's meet Productive in 1 minute. So who is Productive Corporation? Well, you're muted, but I'm glad you thought about it. Productive Corporation provides security solutions for mid-size companies. We offer specialized expertise to answer licensing and technical questions. We also implement, test, and optimize everything that we sell. We do security assessments. We have a virtual CISO. We can do AD services. We can do config assistance and UTM services as well. We also produce a lot of third-party content. We put it on our website. We blog about it. We do educational webinars that will also be posted. All of this is at productivecorp.com/solving security. Bottom line is many ways that we can help you, whether it's implementation, assessment, licensing, optimization services, help at productivecorp.com. If you're stuck back in the previous decade, dial us up 612-375-0204, and we'd love to help you any way that we can. So as I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, very lucky here to have a couple gents from SentinelOne, in particular James Adams, who's going to be presenting today and helping us with seeing what SentinelOne brings and what what they have to offer. I'm looking to turn it over. I'm just going to see if this will make him presenter. You're going to have to let me know, James, because you're. Oh, nope, that is not you. So I'm going to make James presenter. There we go.
There we go.
You moved off my screen here. There's too many people have joined. So
a second. I will find the right screen here. Let me know when I'm good. Should be seeing a screen that says how it works, underlying technology.
Yes, I believe that is exactly what I'm seeing.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Well, I appreciate this. Yeah. So we will definitely go through a live action portion of the demo because we want to show you how our EDR agent works in the case of an attack. Excuse me. And really what an analyst will see from the management console and how they'll be able to read through that. It's one thing to be able to block and prevent attacks from happening, but if something does get through, you want to give you the data, the presentation of what you would look at, how you would ingest that information, and then make the decision on what to do with that threat. Before we jump into the live action demo portion, I am going to go through just this one slide, really to kind of talk about the different layers of detection that we have all on the same endpoint agent. We are a full AV replacement, so we can replace anything from a traditional antivirus all the way up through some of the next generation AV or even in other EDR. And we combine all of that technology in one agent, so we're not having to leverage another technology to do prevention and another technology to do detection. We can do both prevention and detection and response all with the same endpoint. So I'm just going to walk through the 3 different layers of protection or 3 different detection types we have, and then we'll go into and I'll kind of show you what that looks like in the demonstration. So the first one that's not on the screen, but I will show it to you when we get into the console is what we call our reputation engine. The reputation engine is what you could think of if you think of signature bases. Now, we don't actually use signatures in our products. We are very much in the machine learning space. However, we do have this reputation engine, which is a cloud repository of known malicious and suspicious hash values. And we gather that information from several different sources. Just to name some of those sources: VirusTotal, Recorded Future, Reversing Labs. We also have our own internal teams that do everything from monitoring our customers' environments, whether on MDR service, an incident response team, a threat hunting team, as well as being able to look at emerging threats through all of those resources, and then research team as well. And this research team looks at new emerging threats in the threat space. So we take all of that internal data and we add to that repository. The second detection type that we have is not a cloud repository. It is local to the endpoint. And so this is what you see on the screen where it says real-time file analysis. So this is where we move away from just marrying up a hash value that we had on file, but more into looking at the static attributes of a file as it's being saved or written to disk. So you can think of the attributes like the headers of an executable file. Are those married up in a way, or are those malicious or suspicious? So what our agent will do when a threat is, or a document is saved to the operating system or accessed by a user, it will pull out the attributes of that file type at machine speed. It'll compare that to the machine learning model that exists on the endpoint. So it is a local model. It doesn't need to rely on cloud connectivity. And from that analysis, very quickly, it'll say if it is either malicious or suspicious. And then based off of that malicious or suspicious verdict, it'll, put into action one of the action items, which is either to kill it and quarantine it or just detect it. Again, this is local to the endpoint. It doesn't need to reach out to the cloud to get new data files, or it doesn't need to reach out to the cloud to get new information. So if you're on an airplane and you stick a USB stick inside the computer and you pull over a file, that file is going to be scanned locally, and we're going to be able to detect or prevent that from happening, even in airplane mode or even in an air gap situation. The next detection engine we have, so the third one, is what we call our dynamic detection type. So the first two are pre-execution, meaning that there's nothing actually loading, no processes loading into memory. But when processes do load into memory, we also have a detection type that will monitor that, again, using machine learning, using artificial intelligence to understand, are these processes loading in a malicious way? And the way that we do this, and this is kind of part of our patent, is we build a storyline for those processes. So we tag the originating process with what we call a storyline ID, and that storyline ID follows everything that takes place from that originating process all the way until something malicious happens. Let me give you an example of that. So if I go over to my desktop and I open up a Word document and I make a change to the Word document and then I close that Word document down, save it, well, a process did load into memory, so that will have a storyline ID. But there was nothing malicious with that process that I just did. I just opened up a document, made some changes, closed it. We do these types of things on the endpoints all the time. We do these things on computers all the time. But those all still have their own storyline ID. There was nothing malicious about that. However, let's say an example where I open up something and something malicious does happen, right? So maybe PowerShell gets called out, pulls down ransomware, backdoors created all of this malicious activity. Well, that storyline ID is presented to the user. So we pull that forward. And it's very easy for the analyst to be able to understand all the different connected parts from that originating document or from that originating malware, and be able to put that story together so that they can make a determination. It's very easy for them to make that determination because they're not having to sit around and look through all of these different processes and if the threat actor migrated from one to the next. All of this is presented to them in an easy way to understand what's taking place. So this is really how we're able to link together all of the activities that the threat actor or the malware does, is by tagging those all with that same storyline ID. Now, the second thing that this storyline ID does is it gives you the ability to take action. So we're not just presenting that to the user and having the users take that information and understand, okay, what are all the pieces? You can think of it almost like a SOC 1 analyst monitoring all the processes on the endpoint, but doing that automatically for you. So it gives the SOC 1 analyst, the actual person, all of that data already in a nice, neat story. But when they want to go and actually take some action and put things back the way they were, we give them that capability with what we call our one-click cleanup and our one-click rollback. What this does is it takes that storyline ID. Let's take a situation where it's encrypted with ransomware, and it goes all the way back to the originating process. So it basically walks that storyline all the way back to the very first thing that happened when they opened up that original document. Now, it's very easy to do. We'll show that in the demonstration, but it also saves a lot of time for the user, saves a lot of time for the analyst, and it gets the users back to where they were before, so what we call a pre-infected state. Right? So I'm going to keep my demo in a detect only mode so that we can show you what that looks like when everything gets infected and how you can walk that back. So that's how you take the storyline ID and put that into action compared to some of the competitors that we have in the marketplace. The last thing that I'll talk about, and I'll show you this in the demo as well, is all of this stuff that's happening on the endpoint. All of these raw telemetry points, everything that the agent picks up on as far as like processes loading into memory, we actually can store that in an S3 bucket for 30 days, and we'll give the analyst the ability to go and query that information to look for whatever they want, right? Example of that, if they want to look for command line arguments, if they want to look for registry key changes, if they want to look for file modifications, if they want to look for destination IPs, or if they get a hash value from maybe some threat intelligence source and they want to see if that hash is showing up anywhere in their endpoint, or if they want to do threat hunting and looking for maybe living off the land techniques that a threat actor might be doing. So all of this stored telemetry data is what we call our deep visibility, and it gives the analysts a very easy way to start building out their own queries and taking control back into their hands so they can look for things that maybe the agent might not be looking for specifically. So we'll show that in the demo as well.
Hey, James.
All right. Yes.
So is that automated remediation? I mean, will SentinelOne do all of it? Is there any kind of, from the user side, do they request what level of remediation they want, or you guys decide what gets remediated, and, you know, or is there any kind of determination depending on the user?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, you can set up the policy settings, which I'll show you in a moment, where it can be fully automated.
Yep.
But most likely, a user will just kill and quarantine, and then they can go in and take the necessary actions to remediate and roll back. So you can automate all of it, but once it's kind of done, you can't go and undo that. So a lot of times people will just do it manually after the fact.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so I'm going to hide that. So here's a couple of virtual machines that I'm going to use for the attack. Got Kali Linux over to the right. It's a penetration testing operating system. And I've already deployed a couple of documents that have a built-in macro to those. They're going to call back over to this Kali Linux machine. And that's where the Kali Linux is going to send over a ransomware payload to encrypt this machine. Now, this is really kind of supposed to show you like what it would look like if someone were to send a phishing email, or someone were to pull down a document or pull down something from a website and it was malicious. It's going to call back basically to this command and control. Before I do that, I'm going to pop over here. Here's the management console for SentinelOne. And you were asking a question earlier around automating the settings. So if I go in here, you can see that, go to my demo settings here. So these are all different groups that you can set up for your individual clients. But I have mine in detect only, which means that we're not actually going to block or stop any of this attack. We're going to allow this to happen because we want to show you that situation where a threat does get identified by us, but we didn't have any action items to it, meaning we weren't killing and quarantining. And we're going to allow that to infect the system and encrypt the system with ransomware. Now, if I wanted to stop this in the real world situation, most people will have it set up like this, right? Where they're going to kill and quarantine regardless of the confidence score of that threat or that malware that hits the system. And to answer your question around fully automating this, you could do something like this, right? Where it says, hey, as soon as something comes in, I want to kill it, quarantine it, I want to remediate it, and I want to roll it back. However, if you do have it like this, you can't undo these things, right? So if a suspicious threat comes through and it was maybe benign, it just happened to look like it was something that was wrong, you kill and quarantine, you might end up removing some legitimate software because you remediate and rolled back a system that wasn't infected. So most likely people will just stay in this stance because you can always go back after and remediate and roll back. And like I'm going to show you in a moment here, even in detect only mode, I can still go in and kind of fix this. So this is a good fail safe, but most likely you would be in this type of stance in the real world because you don't want to just sit in detect only mode. So we do it mainly for a compelling demo, put it that way. All right, so I'm just going to refresh this a little bit. All right. So I'm going to spin up a command and control server. You're going to use PowerShell Empire. So I've already kind of staged all of this together. And just to be completely transparent, I did turn off all of the engines in order to get these saved to the operating system to begin with. Otherwise, every time I tried to save it, it just got ate up by the agent. So now that it's on the system, I'm going to go through the attack. But in the real world, it's really difficult to even get this malware or these documents on here. So all this is doing right now is waiting for this inbound communication to come back in. So basically, it's just waiting for the user to have some type of action. So I'm going to open this up. There's nothing inside the Word document, but as soon as I close it, you'll see a quick PowerShell call back over. Boom, right there. And you should see that calling over. And you can see the local alert. Now, we have updated this in the console. It's got a little bit different look and feel. It also gives you more information inside of this, and you can actually put some specific details for like your IT team or your security team. So if you wanted to have this local alert show for your users, it could have information like call the help desk or call the security team, you know, something like that. Or you could set up a policy setting where this isn't even something that the user would see. Now, I'm using GANCrab as part of my demonstration, so it's a ransomware variant that will turn everything into crab files. It's a little bit older, but it still does the trick. Obviously, you can see everything's turned into a crab file at this point. The only thing that wasn't turned into a crab file is where to pay the ransom note. So at this point in time, most situations, people would be reverting to backups, and we definitely, think that you should still have your backup strategy in place for your servers and your workstations. But in this situation, we're going to go ahead and show you the rollback capabilities and the remediate capabilities, because the user could be in a situation where they don't really have access to someone to go in and reimage their machine. They could be working remote, so this is very helpful to have this feature built in. Now, I'm going to pop back over here, do a quick these. And as you can see, the alerts do come in. And we have actually spent a lot of time building out the capabilities of user experience. So what I mean by that is, hey, do I have to click 3 or 4 times to do everything in the product? And when it comes to identifying a threat, we want to give you that information very quickly so that you can make that determination from wherever you're at in the console, right? There are going to be parts of the console that you might need to click 2 or 3 times, but in this case I can look very quickly and see information, and I could take action directly from here, or if I wanted to, I could take that same action over from here, right? I can look and see what type of threat it is. So I can say dynamic, meaning a process loaded into memory. I can see that it's a document. Okay, so it's a script inside of a document. Okay, there's a document here. It's on the desktop. It was opened by explorer.exe. So again, this is the originating process. I just double click the icon on the desktop, it loaded into memory. But if I wanted to, I can go into this screen, which will give me a larger view of this, right? So now I get a little bit more information to work with. Let's say, for instance, the first thing you want to do if something comes in and you've identified that it is indeed malicious is you want to remove that from the network. So I could disconnect it from the network here if I wanted to. That way I'm quarantining it from communicating outbound any further, right? So there's no more C2 communication out. It'll still talk to our management console over 443, but it's not going to keep communicating out. It'll also shut it down from spreading laterally, right? So you want to be able to kind of isolate this machine off the network. And if you needed to, you could remote back inside this machine if you needed to pull artifacts or you need to pull information off of it while it's in a network quarantine state. This will give you access via PowerShell so you can pull information back in. I also get some information around the threat, who this user was on the system, what was some command line arguments, and I also get to see the hash value. Now, I can open this hash value in some of these third-party sources, so if I wanted to open in VirusTotal, I could, but it's not there because we build this for our demo specifically, so it's not something that's going to be sitting in VirusTotal, but it feels like a commodity malware. You might go and check to see if it's already there. Now, the other thing this hash value is helpful for is it shows me how many times I've done this on one endpoint. So you can see that I've done it 42 times on the same endpoint starting back in September because I'm doing the same demo over and over and over. But let's for a moment think that this was Outlook.exe instead of Explorer, meaning it came from Outlook, and I saw 42 times over 42 endpoints. Well, that would tell me, hey, this is a phishing campaign, or maybe it's moving laterally and I need to isolate this. The other thing that's helpful about this is if I go to kill and quarantine this, I can apply it to all instances of this threat. So I can say, hey, go out and find this on all those other machines. I don't have to log into 42 different machines and kill 42 different instances. I can just do it all from one thing, right? We do map to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. This is very helpful for people that are using MITRE ATT&CK, either to harden up or shore up their defenses. Maybe it's a blue team or a SOC team, or if maybe you're doing some threat emulation and you're doing red team exercises or using a threat simulation tool to kind of look and see what are these TTPs. And the thing I like about this is we give you very good detail, and we also send you to MITRE if you want to go and check out the MITRE ATT&CK framework information and really understand, okay, what is a scheduled task? Why are they using a scheduled task for persistence? And what are some of the other threat groups that might be using this? This way you can take that information and harden some of your other security products across your stack, or maybe be on the lookout for other different types of techniques by a threat actor. We also give you the very detailed information. So if this persistent happened to be via a local service, we would tell you that here. If it was via registry key that will change it or run at boot time, we will give you that information here. And this is very helpful because when you start going and reviewing this threat, you'll be able to look and see different information around it. And again, here's that storyline ID that I talked about during the presentation. So this is how we're tying all that information together. Really quickly, before I roll this back, let me just give you a visualization of this. So I can come inside of here and I can see the Word document. I can see any telemetry points around it, right? I can see the files that were created, that were modified, right? I can also see Word called PowerShell. PowerShell is encoded. So this starts kind of looking suspicious to me, right? And I can look and see again, this Word document had a network action, right? Calls out to some public IP. Then I look over here.
Hey, James, is that real time? If that thing keeps, if it's spreading, are you seeing that the tree continue to build out?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, so if I continue, there's another demo I do where I kind of jump back and forth and do a slow motion replay. Over to the left, you'll see something say this thread is evolving. So I'll just hit a button that says click here, and it'll actually refresh everything. So if there was more stuff building out, I'd be able to pick that up.
Cool. Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
Yep. And again, most times you'll have it in protect mode, which you don't see any of this. It's basically Word document, PowerShell, and then when PowerShell starts doing all these malicious activities, we step in really quickly. So this demo in a protection state is pretty much killed right here. We also will give you the destination IP. So, excuse me, if there's a network call out, we'll be able to tell you. And in this case, this happens to be my Kali Linux box that I staged everything from. So now we're seeing Word document called PowerShell, calling to another IP address. And then here's the scheduled task that was used for persistence, right? So we saw that earlier in the MITRE ATT&CK. Now we see that scheduled task here, right? Here's where it created a hidden file. Here's where it tried to call WMI to do what? Well, most malware and ransomware wants to delete the shadow copies. Now, part of our rollback capability is storing shadow copies and protecting that as part of our anti-tampering. Why do we do that? We do that because we use the volume shadow copy as part of our rollback. So we need to protect that capability as well, because as you can see, it tried to delete it there. It also tried to delete that command here. What we actually do is we intercept that command and we hand it back to the malware saying successfully completed your task. That way we're not back and forth fighting the malware program to say, oh no, we're going to protect it. We just give it what it wants, right? We give it the command. You can think of it almost like a reverse man-in-the-middle attack in a way. At this point, the analyst can go ahead and make this determination where they're going to mitigate this. Now, I'm just going to do it to one instance here, but I'm going to mark it as a true positive. I'm going to mark it as resolved, and I'm going to kill and quarantine it because I would have done that if I had this in a protect state here. But again, we started this in detect only. So I'm going to kill and quarantine. Now, I need to remediate as well. This means any system changes, file changes, deleted files. And we know there were changes on the system. We know there's a scheduled task that's been a persistent mechanism. It does me no good to kill and quarantine this document if I'm not also catching the scheduled task or finding out where this malware, this threat actor is hidden and created a backdoor for themselves. If there's any registry key changes, as you see here, right, I need to remediate those. So we're basically taking this storyline ID and we're going to walk it all the way back to the original process. And because it was encrypted with ransomware, we're going to roll this back because we do know that that system has been encrypted. Now there's a 30-second heartbeat between the management console and the endpoint. So it's really kind of where we catch that within that 30-second heartbeat. But while we're waiting on that, and if there's any questions in chat, I'll be glad to take those. While we're kind of waiting on that, I'm going to show you this deep visibility. So earlier I mentioned that we're capturing all this raw telemetry data that's happening on the endpoint, and we store that, and that can be useful for several different things. It could be useful because, hey, if a 0-day comes out today and you find out the different tactics that was using, you'd be able to come in here and look for that information. You'd be able to build your own query. In this case, I'm going to just show you a couple of the telemetry points. So if I hit tab, here's all the individual telemetry points that we're capturing. So it's a lot, right? But let's say I'm looking for command line. So I just type in CMD. Now, do I want any command line? Do I want source process command line? Do I want a script, maybe something like PowerShell? Do I want the target process command line? Let's say I want command line, and then I hit tab again, contains the word echo. So in the last 48 hours, show me anything that happened to contain the word echo. Maybe I want to build this out to do something like command line contains, it's this way. So I want to look for name pipe impersonation over the last 48 hours. So I'm going to hit run. And what it's doing is taking these tasks that are happening, or these different command line arguments, and saying, okay, across all of the endpoints in my console, look for that information over the last 48 hours. Let's see if I can flip this one over that way. Now we can do this against several different things. We can also do it against the MITRE ATT&CK indicator. So if I come in here and say indicator, category, hit tab again, category, I can come and say, okay, show me any persistence that's happened in the last 48 hours. And then once it pulls that information back, I can go in and flag that information and say, okay, let me hunt through this and see if this persistence is something I need to be concerned about. Yep, here we go. So this is name pipe impersonation. This is what like Cobalt Strike or Metasploit will use in order to get credentials. So if I open this up, you can see that someone used FOD helper to call PowerShell, right? PowerShell called command.exe, and then you can see echo name pipe created a service so it could get those credentials. So in this case, maybe I want to go in and say, you know what, I want to see this storyline. So I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to pivot and I'm going to show that storyline, because what I started out with was my own individual query. Now I'm going to go in and look for a specific storyline. And now I can open this storyline very similar to what I showed you in my original attack, and I could come in and review all of that. So this is how you could do threat hunting. You can start with something very specific, you could start with something very broad, and then you can also build out your own custom rules. So let's say, for example, I like the way this looks, and I'm like, you know what, I want to be flagged every time something like this happens. Or maybe I come over here to some of our advanced or research queries, and I say, you know what, show me print nightmare. Right? So print nightmare over the last 24 hours. Is it in my environment? Hopefully it's not. If it is, then I'll hopefully go in and kill and quarantine it, which I can do because I can come inside of here and flag it. So for instance, let me just go back to this one. If I open this up, I can go in and flag that as a threat and say, you know what? Mark this as a threat, it'll generate an alert. So I can manually flag this. But with this print nightmare, for example, let's say I wanted to write a custom rule. I don't want to have to come in here and run that query every time. So I'm going to go print nightmare. It's pretty medium severity for me. I'm going to let it run till May. I'm going to have it run against all of my environment, but I could pick a specific site if I wanted to. And then what do I want to do? I want to treat it as a suspicious threat. So now I'm adding my own custom logic to the product so that I can actually be alerted on anything that maybe isn't natively being picked up, or just something outside of something that you want to look for, right? Now, I know we're kind of running a little short on time, so let me get back over to this piece. And this is me mitigating that first threat that came through, right? So the whole demo that I ran just a moment ago. And as you can see, we give you a breakdown. So 13 processes were killed, right? We've killed 13. We've quarantined 1, which is the original file. We've remediated 649, and we've rolled back 1,430. And we actually give you a breakdown. So if you wanted to print this out and show this to a client, say, well, here's everything that we did. Here's everything that we rolled back. Here's everything, so that you don't have this, question or scratching your head wondering, hey, did we catch everything? This is going to give you the assurances. And the way, again, that we're doing this is we're tying it back to the storyline ID, which lets us know that anything that was part of this storyline has now been fully rolled back and remediated. And to just walk you back over here, you can see it's back to where it was, right? So the documents that were encrypted a moment ago are gone. Ransom note's gone, original document that started everything is gone, user's back to working. And again, this is only because of detect mode. We had this in a protection state. None of this really happens. It's a very boring, quick demo, and I don't have too much to talk about. Now, I know we're right up here on time, so if there's any questions in the chat, Todd, feel free to.
That's fantastic, James. I mean, it is funny, right? I mean, so much of that stuff happens automatically that you basically have to, dumb down the system to, right, or put it in passive mode to get anything even to come through, right? So that's good. That's really cool. It's cool to check that out. One question we'd say, does somebody need to be an Infosec pro to run this? It looks like it's pretty intuitive, and you can kind of do queries and figure stuff out pretty straight away.
No, I don't think so. I mean, again, we really talk about our endpoint agent being autonomous, and what we mean by that is in a couple different ways. One, it has its own machine learning algorithms built in, so you don't really have to add your custom detection logic to that. You can do that as I showed here, but what that means is as threats are introduced to the operating system, the agent's going to make that determination using millions of machine learning algorithms that are put together based off of kind of hammering it with a bunch of malware on the back end from our machine learning algorithms. So really it takes that analytical work that someone would have to do, and it kind of puts it back onto the agent, and then all they would have to really do is go in and identify the threat and read through and see, okay, this is a true positive, is there anything else I need to be concerned about? But the agent does all of this correlation for you, so it's not something that they have to spend a lot of time correlating themselves. And again, in a prevention state, this really doesn't even happen. This is really just kind of killed. We might get one or two indicators over here. So the agent can do it on its own. However, if you are very skilled, you're going to have a lot of fun with this because it gives you a lot of capabilities of something that you might not have visibility into now from your current endpoint if you're using something traditional.
Yeah, cool. Well, that's awesome. Really appreciate the presentation today. That's great stuff. So yeah, let's I'll go put you back here, show you the screen. Well, James, thank you so much. Fantastic presentation, and everybody who attended, thank you so much. We